Is it bad that what I'm most disappointed about is they didn't reuse the old music? Well. So, Masters of the Universe, Revelation. It was Revelation, right? Yeah, it was Revelation. It was a generic word subtitle starting with RE, like all of them. Revelation, Reborn, Redemption, Reloaded. Ugh. They gotta ditch that nonsense. It's not quite as bad as Origins for a prequel, but it's pretty bad. But that's the title. How's the actual thing? So this is Kevin Smith's revival, continuation thing of the classic 1980s cartoon, of which I was a fan back in the day. And as a fan, there's a lot to enjoy about this. And also, it did kind of tickle me as a fan of both of all three things that are relevant here. The cartoon, the toys, and the associated mini-comics, and the live-action movie. And as a fan of all three, I really appreciated seeing characters and vehicles that I never saw in the cartoon, but I had as toys, in addition to hearing lines pulled and used that were in the movie. So, the more you were and remember being into He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, the more of a nostalgic tickle you're going to get from this. Now, I don't really want to talk about this, but it's become such a thing. I'm going to address it briefly. Now, I am aware that this has become the latest thing that has become a nerd culture war thing. It won't last. It never does. But apparently the big hullabaloo this time around is a combination of the usual whiners. I'm sorry. Look, there are some channels that I never see them do anything other than complain. I complain a lot. But, I do have stuff that I love to talk about, and I almost never see that from some of these places. Anyway, I don't want this to become a call-out thing. But anyways, the types of channels that you would think would do this have been complaining about this from the first announcement of the first images, because of redesigns, the women look more muscular, how dare they, So apparently the big sticking point, or what they claim is the big sticking point, can we be honest, a lot of these are outrage merchants, and they don't actually have a point. They'll just latch onto whatever they can make a thing out of. And that's not to say that nobody is legitimately disappointed in that. There are some who are, and I don't want to make it sound like every criticism is invalid. I'm just saying I know the voices, especially on a platform like YouTube, that it's driving a lot of this conversation. Anyways, so apparently the big sticking point is that there was rumor that it was going to be more about Teela than it was going to be about He-Man, and that Kevin Smith had said that no, that wasn't the case. Now, I don't know if he actually said that wasn't going to be the case, but all these channels are saying he said it wouldn't be that. And then you watch this, and what's out is 5 episodes, the first half of the first season, and yes, it is very Teela-centric. And He-Man is much more of a background figure. Now, that having been said, if Smith was talking about the season in its entirety, which we haven't seen yet, it's quite possible that it's going to be more of an even split and be more of a He-Man focus going forward. We don't know. But the thing is now that Kevin Smith lied and betrayal, they've review bombed it on Rotten Tomatoes, which the usual nonsense. Here's what I'll have to say. For me, as someone who did grow up on this stuff and loved it and has a lot of nostalgic love for it, but who does not go back and revisit the original cartoons because the few times I try to, holy cow, do they not hold up? At all. I found this to be a really good balance of tickling my nostalgia and also going somewhere new with it. Because, like, let's be honest, if this ultimately was just the old cartoon, format, formula, and all of it, just done in prettier visuals, I think all that would do is make us realize, boy, the original wasn't that good. This is the same thing, just looks better, but there's all this other stuff that, So, I think this did a really good balance, especially that opening episode. That opening episode really does. It feels like the kind of battles I used to stage with my own toys. It feels like that brought to the screen. And like I said, vehicles and characters that I don't remember ever seeing in the cartoon showing up, doing that. It feels like the toys smashing together in the best way. And capturing that vibe is something I love. It's the same reason I unabashedly love the movie G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra, because it has the feeling of playing with the toys and just being ridiculous. And the first episode gives you that in spades. But the thing is, that first episode in a lot of ways is cranked up to 11, and you can't maintain something cranked up to 11. So you got to dial it back after that. And the way they chose to do that, some degree of spoilers for these 5 episodes is going to ensue from here on out, so be aware. What happens at the end of that is that He-Man and Skeletor both die, and the magic of Eternia is left basically almost drained and is then dying. And then when we pick up from there on out, we are following Teela, who has struck out on her own. She felt betrayed because she realized right before he died that He-Man was Prince Adam. So she felt betrayed by him, by Duncan, her adoptive father, Man-at-Arms. She had actually taken up his post of Man-at-Arms in that first episode, which I like that they didn't change the title. It's just Man-at-Arms, even though she's a woman. I like that. And also, the king had felt betrayed, and when he realized that Duncan knew that Adam was He-Man, Duncan's been banished. Teela abandoned her title and has kind of gone a bit mercenary. So we follow her as she encounters things that starts to point to maybe there's a way to fix things. And that includes encounters with the Sorceress and Evil Lyn, and later characters like Beastman, Triclops, Merman, Man-at-Arms, of course, Roboto. Oh man, there's some weird pulls in this. I love it. Later on they even pull, I can't remember what he was called now. I had this toy. But the version of Skeletor that glows in the dark, which in its own mini comic is established to not be Skeletor, but to actually be something else that just looks a hell of a lot like him, but glows in the dark. They pulled that character. There's so many deep cut pulls. I really do. And they just show up. Not a lot of pomp and circumstances, they just show up. Stinkor, for crying out loud. That just feels nice. But my feelings on it overall is, I think for what it is doing, it is smartly structured, because it gives you that initial hit of nostalgia to basically remind you of what the show felt like. Because the show was never this. But it reminds you of how your nostalgia and your memory feels about that show. And then shakes up the status quo in the hope that you will be you're invested now that you've had this reminder of why you love this. Now let's move forward and tell a new story, which I do think is the smarter thing to do. You have to do something to shake it up, because like I said, if you just slip into the old format again, it's actually going to get old really quick. And there's only so many ways that you can shake up the formula, with Skeletor and He-Man still in play. So taking them both off the board and showing what happens to these characters in their absence in a world that doesn't have that struggle going on right now, and a world where magic itself is draining away with so many magic-based characters, that's interesting. Spoilers are going to keep increasing. This is your last warning on this. So when you get characters like Evelyn siding with the sorceress, not because Evelyn has become good, but because she needs magic back in the world. Well, I was going to say as much as the sorceress, maybe not as much. Sorceress actually looks like she's going to die soonish, but like they have a reason. Their interests are aligned. And it's really interesting watching her bond with someone like Orko. And it was really nice seeing Orko done, and because Orko and Cringer, for that matter, are characters who can appeal to you as a kid, but you go back as an adult and go, oh my god, you're really irritating. And Orko was really well done. We got this bit of backstory that didn't feel like a massive retcon or a rewriting or a betrayal of who he was, but it was just new information. You're like, oh, huh. And watching him bond with Evelyn, of all people, and Cringer got me freaking choked up, because this is your last spoiler warning, because I am going to talk about what happens in the very last episode out of these 5. In the end, when Adam does actually come back into the world of the living, when Cringer sees him, his reaction, it choked me up. It was really nice. It was really sweet. And Cringer is another character who, you go back and watch that stuff now, oh boy, wears out his welcome right quick. But even all the characters that come back, it's interesting to see what they do. You know, you have someone like Beastman who kind of just latches on to Evelyn. You have someone like Triclops who's basically started a cult, a technologically based cult. It's like, whoa, okay. And that enables you to do some somewhat darker material without feeling like you are really betraying these characters, because like the world has changed and time has passed. And so these shifts don't feel like fundamental betrayals of who these characters are. They just feel like shifts and drifts of characters that, to me at least, made a lot of sense. And the thing's gorgeous. It looks fantastic. I do, however, have one big overriding criticism of this first 5 episodes. And depending on how things pan out in the second 5, it might diminish this criticism, but I don't think it's going to make it go away entirely. So, at the end of that last episode, the 5th one, He-Man comes back, well, Adam comes back, and Skeletor comes back. And Evelyn resides with Skeletor, and Skeletor is able to acquire the power of Grayskull, which is what he was after in the first episode. So my problem is that for all intents and purposes, the cliffhanger that this episode ends on of Skeletor acquiring the power, there's really no reason why this couldn't have just been the end of the first episode. So it's like we had this fight and this build-up, and oh my god, is Skeletor going to acquire the power? And then it's like, that doesn't really get resolved. That effectively, by the end, you realize that got put on pause. We had 4, so, you know, the remaining of episode 1, 3 episodes, front half of episode 5. So effectively 4 episodes, but 2 of them are half. You get the math. We have this stretch, the bulk of the thing, to ultimately land right back at the thing that we were trying to prevent in the first place. So why not just have him win in the first place? Now, like I said, there are ways to mitigate this, assuming that they do really not let die on the vine the character development that went into characters like Teela, like Man-at-Arms. I was going to say like Adam, we don't really know where Adam's at. It's not clear if he's really changed all that much because he's been absent. And maybe he has. Maybe we'll find out that his basically dying and coming back did fundamentally change him. But we've already had confirmation of at least 2 characters who looked like they had undergone a change just revert back to what they were before. And I wouldn't be surprised if, like, down the road we see Evelyn, regretting that choice, second guessing it. There are still ways to bring it back and bring it about. It's just taking in this first season as only a half and not getting to continue forward to see whether or not the character development that happened over the bulk of this front end actually matters. Unfortunately, it leaves me with a taste of you just delayed a thing for most of it. And again, like maybe the character shifts and journeys will matter in future. I hope they will. Because otherwise, what was the point of any of it? And it's not like I need a deep meaning or point to He-Man. I don't. But it, like, just the storyteller in me is going, why? Well, why, like, oh, we're headed here, big delay, oh, we're right back here. So, whether or not that's a criticism I'm going to stick by is going to depend on the second half of the season. That said, I think I will stick by it's a problem when viewing just this front half. It may no longer be a problem once we have a second half, but for now, that is my big issue with this. I don't, find it as rewarding as something like She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, but it's also not trying to do what that show did. This is trying to evoke and dwell in that cheesy 80s space as much as possible. And given that my love for that is nostalgic more than anything, it's something that I can go, oh, I remember liking that, but is, not stuff that I'd look at today and go, yes, very interesting. Whereas She-Ra felt like something newer and fresher. And that's gonna kind of grab me a little bit more than going for the nostalgia. But you know what? There's nothing wrong with going for the nostalgia. Especially if you can hit the right notes. And I do think, my gripes aside in terms of the overall structure, I do think this did hit the right notes. I think for what it is trying to do as far as evoking a nostalgic property and just being fun and bringing it, up to date with the visuals and making it feel a little bit more mature, for the sake of the audience who enjoyed it as kids but are very much adults now. Yeah, I think it's pretty successful for the most part in what it's trying to do. Not blown away by it, but I did like it. And I'll definitely come back when the rest of the season drops. So, what did you think about Masters of the Universe Revelation? Generic subtitle. Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Like, share, subscribe. I have a Patreon that is how I pay my bills and keeps this whole operation up and running. Rewards for every tier of support. No pressure, though. The likes, shares, and subscribes also help me out, but no pressure on that either because we take a relaxed attitude around here so you can just come on back next time you need a break.